Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
Hundreds of bills move through the Idaho legislature each session, and it can be hard to keep track of what's really at stake. The Connector follows the legislation that's gaining traction with clear reporting and local context you can trust. Stay connected to the State House with The Connector, Idaho Daily News. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright filling in for Jim McGuddett. You're listening to Idaho Matters. Where can you find woolly mammoths, dire wolves, saber-toothed tigers, Iron Man, and Loki? Well, how about the Bruneau Sand Dunes south of Mountain Home? You may have seen it, the BBC Natural History series on Apple TV called Prehistoric Planet. It's a sweeping epic highlighting the big mammals that lived during the Ice Age and the thaw that happened afterward. It's produced by Jon Favreau, who directed and produced Iron Man and Iron Man 2, and it's narrated by Tom Hiddleston, Loki from the Avengers. The animals are digital special effects, of course, but the producers needed real-world landscapes to build their story on, including Bruneau Dunes State Park in Idaho. Local filmmaker Matthew Podolsky was hired as a location manager and also Lana Westbrook was hired as a production assistant, and they were there during the 2 weeks that the BBC crew was in Idaho. Matt's back on the show to tell us more about it. Matt, thanks for coming back to Idaho Matters.
Of course. Always happy to be here.
What is Prehistoric Planet for anybody who hasn't seen it? Describe the series.
Sure. Prehistoric Planet is, it's kind of like a natural history series, but the animals that you see on screen are extinct. They're extinct animals that no longer live in the present environment, but it sort of maintains it makes you feel like you're watching, sort of an episode of Planet Earth. But instead of these amazing landscapes that we can see, in the present day, you're sort of getting this glimpse into the past.
I love it. How did you get contacted about this? This was kind of a long process.
It was, yeah. So I had somebody from the BBC reach out to me back in 2023, early in 2023. And initially they were just looking for somebody to do some location scouting for the series. So they had already identified in Idaho a couple potential spots where they could shoot this one particular scene in the latest season of Prehistoric Planet. And they needed, there were sort of a handful of like specific landscape elements that they were looking for, that they knew they needed for that scene. And the key one was sand dunes, right? They wanted this scene was going to take place in an area with some big dunes, and they were also specifically looking for a spot where like the sand dunes, the sand sort of meets like a small pond or a patch of water.
Gotcha. And so you went out looking for something that might work. You looked at a couple of spots. Where did you look?
I did. I did go to Bruneau, as you mentioned in the intro. Bruneau was one of the spots that I visited and spent a couple of days just kind of hiking around the park, taking tons of pictures and videos that I could share with the BBC crew. And then I also visited St. Anthony's Sand Dunes in eastern Idaho.
Gotcha. And then you got hired as a location manager. So what does a location manager do?
Gotcha. A little bit of everything, right? There was this big crew that flew into town to work on this series. There was they hired a cinematographer who's based in California. So there were a few other folks that were U.S. based on the crew, but most, the bulk of the crew flew in from the UK. And I was sort of the local expert, right? So I was, preparing, getting all of the gear leading up to the shoot. So, the crew was sending me lists of all the gear items that were going to be needed that they didn't want to, fly halfway across the country with. And then once everybody was here on location, I was part of my job was to sort of bring the crew to those locations that I had scouted months previous. So I had kind of identified a handful of specific spots within Bruneau Dunes State Park where certain scene elements I thought could potentially work. And so I was kind of like the local guide within Bruneau Dunes Park. But it's also just a little bit of everything, right? I mean, there were a lot of tasks that needed to be accomplished on location. There was a lot of gear that we had to move to different spots within the park, and most of the shooting locations within Bruneau Park were not directly adjacent to a road. So we did a lot of hauling heavy equipment through deep sand. Was a big part of it, right? And then I would just kind of step in for brief moments during the shoot when an extra hand was needed, right? And one of the most interesting elements of that, I guess the coolest job that I had the opportunity to participate in was the puppetry element of this, right? Because as you mentioned in the introduction, these scenes within Prehistoric Planet, the animals are computer generated, right? They're not real, so we're not seeing them in when we're there on location. We're just shooting the blank landscape. But in order to get the shot that is going to have the greatest impact for the scene, the cinematographers need to understand how the animal is going to be moving and where within the landscape the animal is going to be moving, and to get a sense of the scale of what's happening so everything can be framed correctly. And in order to do that, everything was shot, several times, right? So each scene was shot multiple times, and one of those times was with puppets, right? So that the cinematographers could understand, the movement of the animals, and what they were going to shoot when it was a blank landscape.
Gotcha. So I've seen some of these puppets in action on YouTube. We'll put a link or two on our website, boisestatepublicradio.org, after the show. So I think you've described it pretty well. We're kind of used to seeing things like this, when special effects are going to be added later, where you shoot sort of the background and then the magic happens. But I love the idea of using these puppets to sort of give you an idea of, like you said, scale, maybe movement. We're going to put a picture of one of these puppets on our website, again, after the show. Can you describe what this is? It's really cool. What Ice Age mammal is this?
So the sequence that we filmed in Bruneau is the sort of main character, the main animal character in the sequence is what's called a glyptodon. And so a glyptodon is basically a prehistoric giant armadillo. Nice. And so we were shooting the sequence where there's an adult glyptodon and then a little baby glyptodon that's kind of, chasing it through the sand dunes and following it around. And so yeah, when we were shooting these sequences, we had a life-size sort of replica, right? And a puppet, right? Life-size puppet replica of the glyptodon. And it wasn't. Folks will see when they go to the website and check out the picture. I mean, it's not. It's not perfectly lifelike, right? But the scale is important, so that the movement of the animal, the shots can be framed correctly to accommodate for the movement of the animal in the frame.
Gotcha. And there's sort of a head, and then kind of it looks sort of like a skeleton almost of it, and then the little baby one, of course.
Yes.
How cool was it to be out on the Bruneau Sand Dunes working a puppet for the?
It was super cool. It was super cool, and I mean, really cool for me just to have the experience of, working on a very different kind of a film project than I've ever had the opportunity, to be a part of. Really neat to see, that element of it, of how the puppets were used and how a story like this comes together, right? And I got to work with an amazing crew of people. There was a puppeteer, was one of the members of the crew, and his expertise was really fascinating. Like seeing how he, like the detail that went into like how he, like the movement of the puppets, right? Like
Yeah.
he had clearly done his research and had some understanding of like the types of behavior that we wanted to show in the final scene, right? Which was important for the cinematographers to sort of be able to see, or at least get an idea of like how those animals were going to be moving in the frame once everything was finalized.
Gotcha. Okay, Matt, stick with me here. You talked about going out in the sand dunes. You did some location scouting. You did some carrying of equipment. You did a little puppeteering. You did a little bit of everything. And work with me. You also helped provide food for the crew, right? I mean, this is kind of an all-around sort of job.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I want to point this out because you got a job thanks to the production, but other people benefited in Idaho. The folks who provided the food, the hotels. So how important is it to bring this kind of production to Idaho?
Yeah, I think it's super important, right? I mean, I think, in this situation, there was sort of a landscape-based need, right? It's like the folks at BBC had, done a bunch of work before they even reached out to me, just kind of like looking at different potential sites, across the Western U.S., to sort of evaluate like the feasibility, and they had determined that like the best possible sites were here in Idaho. So that was their plan. It was driven by the unique landscapes that we have here in southern Idaho. But other productions don't always have that same sort of decision making matrix, right? Like the unique landscapes that we have here in Idaho are not always like a crucial part of the decision making for film productions. Unfortunately, like here in Idaho, we just don't have, I guess, I guess there's a couple different elements to it. Like one is that a lot of states set up tax breaks for productions to incentivize, whether it's, a Hollywood production or BBC or any other kind of big budget film production. A lot of states incentivize that kind of economic activity through tax breaks. That's something that we don't have here in Idaho, so that incentive doesn't exist. We also used to have a film office here in Idaho, which has been defunct for a number of years. So there isn't even like an office where a larger production company, like a producer representing some larger production company, could reach out to sort of get information about what it's like to put together a shoot here in our state. So I think there's definitely, in my opinion, as a filmmaker, right, like it benefits me greatly when and anybody else who works in this field when we have more productions coming through our state. And I'm not sure of all the things that would need to happen to sort of like increase the opportunity that exists for that kind of work here in Idaho. But you're certainly right that it benefits more than just the film team, because there's all these other things that come along with a film production. And, in the scheme of things, this Prehistoric Planet shoot was not enormous, right? We had like a 10 or 12 person crew. And, I was going out and, purchasing food and in addition, it wasn't just food. It was, all kinds of, I had long gear lists that were given to me ahead of this shoot. And there's always like unforeseen things that pop up, right? So at the end of every day, it was like, all right, here are the things that we need to like make things happen the next day, right?
Okay, I got about a minute left. So how cool was it after doing all of this to actually turn on Prehistoric Planet and see your giant armadillo in action?
Oh my God, it's so cool. It's so cool. And I mean, I think the landscapes are definitely recognizable. Like for folks that have spent time in Bruneau Dunes State Park, like you're going to recognize it. Like it's really cool. And for me, spending so much time in each of these locations, like, and really visualizing these shots, like as blank landscapes, right? Or with like the temporary sort of puppets walking through, like, it's just really cool, to see how it all came together and to see how lifelike, these animals look. You can really imagine, what it might've looked like for prehistoric creatures to be walking through these Idaho landscapes.
Wow. Matt, thanks for telling us about it. This is great.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking with local filmmaker Matt Podolsky, who helped the BBC when they were at the Bruneau Sand Dunes, filming scenes for the hit series Prehistoric Planet. We're going to put some pictures on our website, including one of the giant armadillo puppet. Just go to BoiseStatePublicRadio.org after the show.
You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, host of Fresh Air. Hey, take a break from the 24-hour news cycle with us and listen to long-form interviews with your favorite authors, actors, filmmakers, comedians, and musicians, the people making the art that nourishes us and speaks to our times. So listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.